Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Zweihander, tabletop role-playing game. Zweihander is a grim and perilous role-playing game. It's a relatively new tabletop role-playing game, came out within the last 2-3 years. It is an absolute beast. It has a tabletop core it has a core rule book that is incredibly large. It is 672 pages today, 72 pages long. And today I want to talk about the professions, specifically the professions within Zweihander, because they're really quite unique. So there's a long list of them, and I kind of want to dive into this list and explore these professions that exist within Zweihander tabletop role-playing game. So let's dig in, right? Adherent, anchorite, animal tamer, apothecary, artisan, astrologer, it's the A's, barber surgeon, beggar, berserker, bounty hunter, bravo, buccaneer, busker, camp follower, charlatan, cheapjack, coach master, courtier, cutthroat, dilettante. Whew, really incredible. Dragoon, envoy, footpad, forester, forger, gambler, grave robber, gutter snipe, hedge knight, hedge wise, herder, huntsman, jailer, jester, laborer, lawyer, man-at-arms, medium, militiaman, monk, old believer, peasant, penitent, pilgrim, pit fighter, preacher. Here's one. There is one that starts with a P, and it's for a person who sells intimacy. I'm not even going to say the word. Right? Okay. Provocateur, pugilist, rabble-rouser, raconteur, rake, rapscallion, rat-catcher, reeve, road agent, sailor, scout, seer, sellsword. And in addition to that, there is servant, slayer, smuggler, sorcerer, squire, student, theologian, thief, troubadour, vagabond, valet, and watchman. This is truly an incredibly long list. It is over 70 professions, right? So one thing that's really fascinating about this is because Zweihander goes into this issue of professions, right? It's really fascinating. So what does using these professions really allow the game to do, right? So basically, Dungeons & Dragons has a dozen core classes. Actually, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is making a big deal, right? That Eberron, the new Eberron book, which is going to be a source book, right now for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, those print products are split into the 3 core rule books, 3 box sets, 7 source books, and 11 adventure books, right? The adventure books they're just that. They're adventure books. They don't really bring you that much. They don't really bring you almost anything official or new that you can add to the table. But the new Eberron book that's going to come out, I believe it's going to come out in September or November. I think it's September. No, it's November, sorry. That we're going to get like our 13th official class, which is Artificer, right? Here, Zweihander is... I just read you 70 professions, right? 70 professions. That is incredible, right? So it allows the game to go into this super deep area, right? And where the player character options are much more specific. Now, one of the reasons why Zweihander is so long in the core rulebook, 672 pages, is because all of these are actually built out. Like, these are real, actual professions, and they really are explored in the game. It's pretty amazing, right? Let's just kind of take a tour, through these and kind of and go in. So, like adherent, right? That is specifically, right, you're dealing with religion, right? And one of the things that this profession approach does, which is much more specific than what Dungeons & Dragons uses, is it really allows you to paint the world much more specifically, and I think a little bit more deeply. It's really quite interesting, right? So adherent would point toward the religion of the world, right? The other thing is like anchorite. I'll tell you right now, I don't even know what an anchorite is, right? And that's something that's really is pretty awesome, right? If you take all of the classes that are in Dungeons and Dragons, most people are going to know what they are. But when you go with 70 specific professions, right, you allow yourself to explore, areas of knowledge that a player character could have a deep, deep area of knowledge in, and you reach areas that aren't even like within the normal scope of knowledge for a normal person. Now, I got 2 degrees, right? I don't even know what an anchorite is, right? Astrologer. This is a great, this is really interesting, right? So astrologer, here you see someone, who has deep knowledge of the stars. So you could be getting information about, how is the world going to change when this planet or that planet or this star is in alignment. Also, what are the specific, like what kind of, what do the people of the world think when certain alignments happen? Are they frightened? Are they joyful? All these kind of things. And being able to go into these super deep professions really opens this up. Now, I will say, so you get all these benefits, these fantastic benefits of having this deep, deep knowledge, right? But it does come at a price. One of the issues here is they talk about this a little bit in Zweihander, but I do not think they did a good enough job. They actually, I'll tell you right now, Zweihander didn't really have the ability to solve the problems of having this many professions, and the reason why is I have a really distinct opinion of Zweihander overall. I think this is an incredible accomplishment by someone who could have accomplished a lot more and done it better. Only from the perspective of the creator of Zweihander, the specific game designer of Zweihander. In my opinion, he is pretty classic. Like, there's this whole line of design now, which is whatever you want to do is great. It's all, we're going to equip you to build the world you want to build and tell the story you want to tell. And here's and addressing that right in the rules, right? Now, the problem with this is, in my opinion, the best game designers are like, this is the game, right? Here's the design. I'm going to set it down for you, and then you can push off that like a wall, right? And no game designer needs to tell you that you can ignore their design. Good DMs are going to ignore your design without you giving them permission to do that. In fact, you giving them permission to do that, I think in many ways kind of stifles the fun of it, right? Like, be the authority on your own game. And that's something I think is really dying in tabletop role-playing game design right now, is being the authority on your own game. Like, game designers don't even feel like they have the ability to be the authority on their own game, right? And it could be a real issue. So where did they fall down in Zweihander in this huge range of professions, right? Well, one of them is like, what are you going to do if you come to the table and you say, okay, what does everybody want to run? And Sally goes, I want to run an astrologer. And then Emma says, oh, I would like to be a courtier. And then specifically, Sarah says, oh, well, I'd really like to be a sailor. And then finally, Danielle says, and I would like to be a squire. What the heck? What are you gonna run? What are you gonna do with that, right? Like, what the heck? Like, there's no possibility to build, an area where all of these crazy professions are going to be able to be a cohesive team, right? Like, either, some of them are going to be able to do virtually nothing in the environment, or it's going to be a mishmash, right? So that means the dungeon master is really going to have to say, swoop, 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 and give you some really specific, like, guidelines going into the game and saying, this is going to be a game that's set in the castle of Baron XYZ, right? And so if you could be a courtier, or you could be a knight, or you could be a sorcerer, and all of them are going to be in service to the queen, and so, but then, you're taking this broad swath of 70 different professions, and you're cutting half of them out, right? And you're saying, okay, we need to divide the lines up, right? So you can't just unleash people on these 70 different, professions, which is kind of interesting, right? But it is really, really cool. One of the things, so that's one thing that is wrong with the game. By the way, I do have respect for Zweihander for what the game accomplishes. There are things I wanted it to accomplish that it doesn't, right? But that's okay. You can't, you can't make a game, be all things for all people, and that's totally okay, right? So one of the nice things is this fanned out array of professions also allows you to do is it allows you to take even one of these professions and turn an entire campaign around one profession. Perfect example of that is bounty hunter, right? You can have a crew of bounty hunters. And if you run a bounty hunter campaign, right, you can throw in, bounty hunter, cutthroat, a dragoon, you can get them in there. You can get a hedge knight in there, a man at arms, right? A militiaman, right? As soon as you say, hey, this is going to be a bounty hunter game, that takes you through a thread of the professions. And guess what? You can do that with any of them, right? Like, and choose one, well, almost any of them. Actually, any of them, right? You could choose, this specific adventure, like this specific focus on a profession, and then draw a thread through the rest of the professions and saying, okay, this touches this touches this, right? And one of the things that is really nice is you can, if you buy Zweihander and you just sit down, right, and you look at this array of professions, like, because you have 70 professions, I think any game master worth their salt, you're going to sit down with this list for 5 minutes and you're going to walk away with 3 campaign ideas minimum. Good game master's going to have 21 campaign ideas, and you're going to have to choose the best. And that's great. It's great when you are a game master and you're like, I have a lot of good ideas. Let's get to the best idea. That is an awesome place to be. The other thing this does is the type of campaigns you can run, right? So a perfect example of this would be a busker, right? Do you know what a busker is? A busker is someone who sings, right? So it's like a bard, right? So you could take a busker, you could have a group of buskers and do like a really unusual campaign where it's almost like a traveling band, right? So combat might be a really light part of the game, right? And it's really, traveling from town to town, interacting with the people, helping people if they can. Maybe you have one combat type and they fix kind of like strong arm problems or monster problems, but the rest of them are really working on, forms of songs and poetry. And, it completely changes the tenor of the campaign. And it's really, really cool, right? Now, I will say, there are some problem professions in here. Right? Camp follower, right? And the one that I would not say the name for, the one who sells intimacy. Whew, what is the value of that kind of campaign, right? So, like, sometimes when when you have 70 professions, you're thinking, maybe we should have cut back on this number. I'm not sure I would have really gone that far. Like, and that's another thing that really is really fascinating by Zweihander, right? Zweihander is expansive, and it gives you all these options. But also when you look at Zweihander, and especially with the 672 pages of it, right, you're like, was the range set too wide, right? And it is really fascinating. The game brings up this question, the game also really kind of, the other thing that's really wonderful about this super broad, beautiful, array of professions is you can rope in young modern players by connecting them to video games. A perfect example of this would be Grave Robber, right? Like Grave Robber, you can just say Lara Croft, right? Like, and older gamers, newer gamers, they're gonna know what that means. They're like, oh, I played that game. That's kind of cool. Let's do it, man. It's really kind of a very interesting, perspective. The other thing that you get to when you have an array of professions this broad is you just have stuff that like no other tabletop role-playing game really allows you to dig into. Jailer, like, could you could run a campaign where all the player characters are guards, what would that do, right? Are some of them good and really serve the queen well and make sure that make sure that the prisoners are really taken care of well, and that what the queen like, that the prisoners, that the jail is well run, that the queen's brig, brig is the wrong word, but the queen's dungeon is well run, right? And if she put a noble in there 15 years ago, that noble's going to be alive and not dead, right? Because he was beaten to death by another prisoner, or starved to death, or even committed suicide. It's an interesting, and so you could have player characters going in, all the player characters as jailers, and are guards within the Queen's jail. What does that campaign look like? Dungeons and Dragons has absolutely no ability to run this game, right? Because they mechanically, right? They can't equip you for this, right? Zweihander goes down this road, right? And allows just ideas for things that are really, really out there, like incredibly unusual, right? So, and now I will say this. So we talked about maybe there being questionable reasons from a moral perspective for some of these professions. Some of them seem to be, some of the professions, again, because the number is so high, are just a bad idea from the mechanical perspective. Peasant, this reminds me of an old tradition that I was hoping we were moving away from. And Zweihander doesn't suffer too much from this, but I'm kind of a little bit sad to see, professions like peasant on the list. And the reason why is it comes from this old 80s, 90s, you're a dirt farmer, right? Perspective, where the game designers were like, you're going to need to start as a dirt finder with virtually no skills, and your character's really going to be terrible. And only after you've played for 6, 12, 18 months and paid your dues will you have even moderate power, right? It's very highfalutin. It's something that I had been really hoping would die, and it just hasn't gone away. So I think that's part of the old TTRB tradition of dirt farmer, and making the players play for a long time before they have fun. I really hope this does die, but games like Zweihander keep it around. It's really, really unusual, right? Some of the other great things is just the words themselves are fantastic, right? And the game gives you really specific, hey, this is how this works from a mechanical perspective. But some of them, the words are so rich and so robust and have so much freight that you could just that a good player is going to be able to unpack it even further than a game meant it to be unpacked, right? A perfect example of this is a rapscallion, right? What the heck? I'm playing a rapscallion, right? The possibilities are almost limitless, and they're very exciting, right? It's just really, I think it's really cool, The other nice thing that this game does, right, is Dungeons & Dragons has a fighter, right? There have to be 15, 20 professions I would say 10 or 15 professions on this list that are here's fighter, but with this flavor, with this color, with this spice, right? And I love that. Perfect example of this is pit fighter. Man, that is a cool character. Now clearly your character is out of the pits now, and but they have this, they're going to have a specific fighting style. They're going to have ticks, and that goes right. That's another issue, is all these professions bring you this mechanical, because Zweihander is so robust from a page count. These all have some really nice, solid, here's some skills, here's some, essentially feats that are going to come with this, right? And so you get that mechanical robustness, but in addition to that, you also really get this, they're coming with a background. There's almost a background that's been built into all of these. Truly, this is an incredible game. And again, profession smuggler, right? That's one word, a whole campaign. Everybody's a smuggler, or you can get something smuggler adjacent. And by the way, a lot of these professions, man at arms, You could put that in almost any campaign, except even a courtier, right? Like, there's going to be a man-at-arms who stands in a corner, right? And even if you have a game that's completely set in the corner and you have a man-at-arms, he's never going to fight anything, right? But he can absolutely be included in that story, right? And he might fight once or twice in the entire campaign, right? But it might be at critical times, right? To tell the truth, Zweihander is a game I love and a game I don't love. It is really a fascinating game, and I think there's a lot to think about with this professions approach rather than with a class approach. It's really robust. It's really fascinating. It needs to be said that, of course, another game that does this is the Warhammer games. The Warhammer fantasy games, right? Now, the reality is, I really think Zweihander has surpassed Warhammer in a few different ways. And of course, it's new. Like, old games are tough to sell, like, especially to new players. So, I really love the robust list of professions in Zweihander. It was definitely worth exploring. Thanks for taking the time to listen and explore the professions of Zweihander with me. I'd love to know what's your favorite profession that's on the list. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.